Hey everyone, it's Summer and I run the Wispy Realm, and today we are going to be making a 3-layered mushroom. Now I've already preconditioned my clay. I am using Super Sculpey, and it takes about 5-10 minutes to precondition to get all the air bubbles and everything out and get it to where it's soft enough to work with. And then we're just going to roll it into a ball, and then we're going to roll it into the base, which is a tapered form, which you're going to see here in just a moment. There we go, we got it started. And we're going to taper it at the top, and then we're going to press it down into the wax paper I have down here on my table. We want to give it a flat bottom, just like that. Press it down a little bit more. We don't want it to tip over as we add the different layers. There we go. Taper it a little more at the top, just to be sure it has that cylinder look. There. Now I'm going to take a smaller piece of clay, I'm going to roll it into a snake, and then I'm going to flatten it with my rolling pin. And we're going to use this as a little skin lip on the base. Mushrooms have this little skin lip around them a lot of the time. So we just want to flatten it out. And I do it both directions just to try to make it as even as I possibly can while staying in camera form. There we go. And then I'll take my cutter and I'm going to cut the uneven edges off, because we want them nice and even before we put it on our base. There's one. And there's two. You can actually make this bigger than mine if you want to. It just depends on how big your mushroom base is. Then we're going to lightly put this around the middle of the base. And we want to do it very, very lightly because we don't want it to press all the way down into the base. We just want the top part into the base. And then we're going to rip off any excess we don't need. Just like that. Okay. And then we're going to carefully blend the top edge into the base of the mushroom. And we're going to do this to make sure that it looks like it's naturally coming out of the mushroom. We don't want it to look blended. We want it to look like it's all a single piece. And I just use my fingers for this. You can use a silicone tool, a ball tool, whatever works for you, but I prefer to use my fingers. And then I'm just going to go around and very lightly lift up the edges. Just like that. It takes a little bit of patience. You don't want to pull too hard or you'll pull it off. And then I'm going to go around and I'm going to lightly even it out so it doesn't look so curled. There we go. There we go. And we have the base pretty much done. There we are. Now we're going to start working on the 3 layers. We're going to start with the bottom layer, which should be your bigger layer. Now this is also going to be based off how big your mushroom is. I generally eyeball it. I don't really go by measured sizes. I eyeball it and see how it looks. So we're going to roll it into a circle. Then we're going to take our finger and we're going to indent it in the middle, like that. And then we're going to go around the edges and flatten it all out. We want to keep the middle more raised, but flatten out the sides of the bottom part of the mushroom head. There we go. There we are. There we go. Keep it pretty flat. I get them pretty flat. And then on the underside, we're going to make the gills. And I use a needle tool to do this. I know that some people have used a razor blade or a blade, some kind of blade to do the lips. But I'm not really big on using the razor for my gills and stuff. So I just use the pointy tool, which is kind of like a needle. And then I drag it across the underside to make the gills. And I start out like cutting it like a pizza. Well, not really cutting it, but indenting it kind of like a pizza. And then I start going a little bit faster at it to give it more depth. So some of them are shallow, some of them are deep, and we will do this on all 3 layers. And it is a little bit tedious. You got to have a little bit of patience with it, but it does make it look pretty neat in the end. And I guess you could go without doing the gills if you really wanted to, but I prefer them. I like it's the small details that come out in a piece that really either make it or break it, and the gills are something that just makes it for me. All right. Now I'm going to take my ball tool and press in the middle just so that it has that nice circle there so I can press it onto the top of the base. You do not have to do this. You could just put it on the base. Now I'm going to carefully push it down onto the top of the base. Try not to squish all the edges. And there we have our first bottom layer of this mushroom. All right, the next one needs to be a little bit smaller than the first one. And again, we will roll it into a ball. Press our finger in the middle. And then flatten out around the sides. Now this one we do want to measure against the first one, just so that we make sure that we have it smaller. We don't want it bigger than the first one, we need it smaller. There we go. Once I have that, I will use my needle tool and I will cut it into my pizza shape. And then I will start quickly going through the gills again. All right, just like this. And I really like as I'm pulling the clay out, it gives the edges a unique look too. Not quite torn, but kind of torn. Like when a mushroom comes up out of itself, it kind of tears on the edges because the edges get so thin. And I think that's what I like about dragging my needle tool all the way to the end, is that it thins out that edge a little bit more where the gill is. There we go. Ball tool in the middle so I can put it on the top easier. For me anyways. We're going to very carefully lift up the edges and then set it down because we don't want the edges to touch. We don't want them to be on top of each other's edges. We just want the very middle to touch. And I'm going to rip this little side here because there's rips in the mushrooms. There we go. And you can see how I don't really let my edges touch the bottom one. There we go. And I'm going to make sure my tip still has that tapered edge at the top so I can add my third layer. And it's starting to come together quite nice. Pull that down a little. Just make sure they don't stick together. There we go. The third layer is going to be much smaller. And again, we're going to roll it into our ball. Press our finger in the middle. And then start slowly pulling out the edges, making those edges thin. And then we're going to have to take a look and make sure that it goes to the size it needs to. It needs to be a little bit bigger on this one, okay? There we go. That looks much better. There we go. Now we're going to create the gills. And this is our last step. After we create the gills, we'll go ahead and add this top part to the very top of our mushroom. Make sure the sides don't touch the second part, the second layer. And then we are going to bake this at the temperature on your clay package. So if you're not using Super Sculpey, you're using Primo or Fimo or whatever brand you're deciding to use, because I'm going to paint this, that's why I'm using Super Sculpey, and that's going to be in part 2. But you want to make sure that you're going to bake it at the temperature that it says on the package. So this is probably going to go in for me for about 45 minutes after I get the top all finished. There we go. Poof. Now we have a mushroom. I'm going to make sure that none of the sides are touching all the way down at the bottom, which they're not. And then I'm going to put it in the oven for about 40 minutes. And then part 2, I'm going to show you how I would paint this. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you tomorrow for part number 2. Thank you so much for watching, and hit that subscribe button.